pleasure to be here today. One of our favorite things to do is to promote lighting education in communities. The need is clear that lighting regulations and lighting zoning is very needed in this town. And we are here today to really pull back and understand what makes good lighting. So the team that we have of experts is, I feel like it's a stacked bench. Myself, I'm the project manager, and I've got 15 years of experience in lighting, and I'm here to help foster the project to go in the direction so that it can get approved, and the whole project management process. That's my role here. We've got Rick Udding. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, Rick.
Yeah, I'll go last.
Okay, all right. Debbie Melton sitting over there. Debbie's our lighting designer, and her job here is to make sure that we can do lighting that's good for the needs of a project, but also satisfy the needs of a zoning ordinance. So sometimes you have both and they can't come together into one piece. She's here to make sure that they can. So that's her very specific role. Kate McBride, who we have online, she's our project planner. She's got lots of experience when it comes to the planning part of our world. How do we write the correct code language? How do we communicate to the stakeholders? How do we communicate to the community in a way that's helpful for the ordinance or zoning regulations? Another very important person is Katie Phelan, and she is our technical lead. And so what her job to do is she helps set up the lighting survey as well as Kate. But when we have surveys, we have to extract the data and what's important and what do we need to focus on in order to create the best ordinance possible. She is an expert in that area, as among many other talents, but that's what we have her on this team for. Rick, thank you.
As Brittany said, we love coming out into communities and being able to talk with you and learn more about your community and share with you what we see across the United States. So I'm Rick Udding. I'm actually a retired lighting executive. I used to work for a luminaire manufacturer. I have a patent for low glare light, etc. And here's my second career. I'm an outdoor lighting advisor for Clanton and Associates. I actually live in Michigan, and I wear a couple other hats. I've been the vice chair of outdoor lighting standards for the Illuminating Engineering Society, which is the United States branch of American National Standards. And so we've been writing the outdoor lighting standards now for 9 years. And I also advise DarkSky International out of Tucson, Arizona. So I'm a policy advisor for them. So I wear a couple different hats. We thought that the best way to start today was to work on something we call Lighting 101. And when we jump into Lighting 101, we're going to learn about some vocabulary and some basics of outdoor lighting. And it's really, you might think it's technical, but I'll tell you the reaction from people time and time again is, that was really interesting, I can take that home and use it at my house. So it's just good information for people to have. We'll go into more detail about light pollution, what it is, how you measure it, how you can control it, because of the impacts that light pollution may have, and then we'll get down into what we see as sort of best practices for lighting requirements and standards. Does that sound good? Okay. So, I'll start with vocabulary and open forum, right? We love the interaction, so I guess if there is a question, do we want to go live with questions while we're doing this, David? Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds great.
Okay.
We'll make sure, because it's recorded, that people record we'll record the questions with the mic.
Okay, very good. So some basic vocabulary, terms that we're going to use that I want you to understand. The amount of light that comes out of product is measured in lumens. So if you go to the store to buy light bulbs, the packaging will tell you how many lumens that product is going to put out. 800 lumens is the typical standard old incandescent light bulb. That puts out, so we no longer buy those because it's a 60 watt bulb. Those days are gone. It's an 800 lumen product, and now they're so efficient, it's like 9 watts. Okay, so lumens. The second term is illuminance, okay? Illuminance is different than the amount of light coming out of the product. It's actually the amount of light that hits the target, okay? So think of it this way. The sun puts out a lot of light, but by the time it gets here, it's pretty reasonable, okay? So distance played a factor. So we will talk about horizontal illuminance, which is what's on the ground and the path, and we can see cracks and trip hazards. But we will also talk about vertical illuminance, the facades of buildings, the fronts of people. We walk upright and we tend to look to the horizon when we navigate, and so vertical illuminance is also a very important criteria, okay? Final term I just want to mention, when we talk about a light product, straight down is 0 degrees. So straight down is 0 degrees. Straight sideways towards the horizon is 90 degrees. Any questions on that? I'm just laying the groundwork for things to come. Okay, excellent. Okay, the visual sequence. The eye is an amazing piece of equipment. You can go into Yellowstone National Park where there is absolutely no artificial lighting whatsoever, and you can see amazingly well. It's because the eye adapts, okay? Pupil gets bigger, lets more light in, chemicals in your eye change, switch from just using rods and cones to rods. It's an amazing thing. But the minute you introduce artificial light or something that's bright, your eye has no choice but to adapt to that source. So the pupil will get smaller and it will change, okay? So glare. The minute you introduce something that is bright entering people's eye, their adaptation is now at that light level, which will make everything else seem dark. The eye is amazing in the Yellowstone environment because everything is of that light level. But the minute you have bright and dark, the pupil can't do both at the same time. Okay? So if you remove that glare source or you prevent high brightness from entering the eye, other things will look better. Other things will look brighter because your pupil was open. Okay? So glare inhibits good vision. Okay? So this adaptation story is if you go to a gas station where there's 200 foot candles, sometimes. When you drive away, you're driving into darkness and your eye has not yet adapted. You are temporarily blinded. You're driving disabled, okay? So adaptation takes a little bit of time. Your eye can go from dark to bright really quick, but you can't go from bright to dark really quick. It takes minutes, okay? So this is a dangerous scenario in the public. And there's a temptation that if something's bright and this looks dark, well then I should add more light to that. And then I should add more light to that. And it's a vicious cycle. The reality is if you actually would have lowered this light level, that would have looked brighter. Okay? Visual sequence. How we see has nothing to do with light level. You see based on contrast. The reason we put black letters on a white piece of paper, it's contrast. If I put white letters on a white piece of paper and I light it up with as much light as I can, you can't see it. We see based on contrast. So as much as we are lighting designers, we want to also be shadow designers. Shadow can be extremely informative, okay? So here's two situations with a very uniform roadway with a rather contrasted pedestrian walkway. If a pedestrian is walking on that walkway and something passes through those light beams, your peripheral vision will detect it in a second and you'll know that something's moving. If something's moving in that road, it's being illuminated to the same brightness as everything else and you'll actually not notice it. So more light is, again, not necessarily safe, okay? So contrast. And then the third piece of that puzzle is spectrum. The light that comes out of the source is artificial, okay? The sun is giving us all the colors of the rainbow. We really like light sources that have a lot of the colors of the rainbow, but in a lot of cases they don't. So just understand that sometimes spectrum can help drive contrast. For those online, they can't necessarily see it, but you know, this is a blue vehicle, that's a blue vehicle, you can actually tell they're two different blues. This is a green vehicle, you actually can't tell that's green, and that you might think those are the same vehicle. So if you're trying to describe, oh, it was a green vehicle, okay. So contrast could be important. Any questions on the visual sequence? How we see, what's important to us? Good.
Pop quiz?
So we're going to dive in just a little bit deeper on what I said. This would be a typical lighting design scenario. It's a walkway. I don't want you to trip and fall on the walkway. So the lighting standards say you should really put a 1/2 foot candle down on that path because you're going to walk like this so that you don't trip. Well, that's not really how we walk, but okay, all right, fair enough. There are cracks in the side. 1/2 foot candle. Well, there's a building there. That's really easy to run electricity into the building. So I'll just put a convenient wall pack on the side of the building and it will certainly spew some light down on this path to get a 1/2 foot candle. Reality is, if you could use a higher quality light pack to prevent glare from entering your eye, don't let the glare enter your eye, you would see that there's actually a person in that doorway. That may have been information that you wanted to know. So again, this is the scenario. If you prevent your eye from adapting to the wrong state, other things will appear brighter and you'll have better visual performance. Okay? Brittany's going to show an example in Denver that was really cool. Any questions on that? Glare's bad. Okay. Contrast, we already talked about contrast. So again, it isn't about the amount of light that you put on it. So lighting designers, unfortunately, are often brought in at the very end. Hey, I did this great building, the architecture is amazing, can you light it up? Boy, if we would have had the opportunity to help pick the colors, the materials, the texture, the shadows, we could create a contrast that would have required less light. So there is no right or wrong as to what you should do, but contrast is how we see.
Awesome. So this slide, you all might have seen this before, understanding what is actually the different numbers or the call color temperature when we want to assign a color to a light source. So behind or on the slide, you'll see this is the general color temperature range that we see with our sun. I like to describe it as the changing colors of the sun over the course of the day. Many of you all might have heard of circadian lighting or health conscious lighting, but in the morning you get that very warm, it goes morning and evening, but you get that warm, short wavelength of light, and then over the course of the day it gets really blue. Like for example, right now it's probably 20,000 K outside, but it feels great because it's outside. Now, how do we tune that to the right appropriate level for a nighttime lighting environment? That's what's really important, and how do certain species react to the different color temperature of light. So this is, great diagram when it comes to describing the different ranges. And so here we have some photos of the nighttime environment of what it looks like in that warmer range. So we've got some photos, example, I believe it's Grand Canyon?
Yep.
For the 1800K, how does that feel versus 2200K versus 2700K versus 3000K? And what's interesting in these images is that although we would call it very warm light, like the 3000K, if I go back a slide, what you think would be really warm and yellow, actually in the nighttime environment, almost feels a little bluish. And I think this has to do with the fact that we grew up with high pressure sodium lights, and so I think there's this culture of understanding the nighttime lighting as being very, very warm. It's something we're already exposed to and sort of expect. So being able to tune the lights to 2700K isn't really that difficult. If I could just do a quick side story, with LED technology coming out, that was released as, 5000K was the best way they could start the process of switching the high pressure sodiums to LEDs, because that was the technology that came first. The LED chip itself is blue inherently, and you have to cover it with a phosphor chip. That's why you see yellow over the LED. But as we've gotten better, we can tune that to be more of a warmer color temperature. And so while there's when it was first released, it was all 5000K, doesn't mean that's right. So just thinking of that, I just want to plant that seed there.
So this is the example we were kind of mentioning, okay? This is Denver's 16th Street Mall.
If you want to walk, we have the mic.
Thank you. No, I'm good. So this is Denver's 16th Street Mall, and if you haven't been to Denver, this is a 14-block tourism corridor. So that's the Hard Rock Cafe. I mean, just think to yourself, where did they put the Hard Rock Cafe? They put it in the 100% corner of downtown Denver. And this was the environment, and what they found is that people were not renewing their leases, store owners were moving out, and the vibe on the mall was changing a little bit, and they wanted us to address the lighting, okay? We worked with the University of Colorado to take some pre-metrics so that we could look at post-mortem afterwards. This is 3.5 foot candles, average. I talked a minute ago about the pathway with a 1/2 foot candle. This was 3.5 foot candles on a major rapid bus 2-way route with pedestrian traffic, okay, across granite pavers. Color temperature, relatively low, very warm. Color rendering, not great, a 28 out of 100, which means it didn't have a lot of spectrum in the color to be able to replicate things like the plants. You can't tell if these plants are healthy green or not. We go back to contrast, right? Okay. So moral of the story is, we were able to redo the lighting for the city of Denver, and we lowered the light level by 3. We lowered the light level on average from 3.4 to 1.1 foot candles. Color temperature was still warm, 3000. Color rendering went way up. Plants look pretty good and healthy green, right? The survey work by the University of Colorado from pedestrians is that they felt like they could see better, and they felt more reassured, felt more confident. And so the goal of the city, again, was to bring back tenants, fill the leases, and bring back a vibrancy to an important commercial corridor. We did this with less light. So the idea that, light's good, therefore more is better, is just not how the eye works. So we're very excited to share stories like that with you. Bill.
So less light is definitely defined by fewer foot candles, or lumens, or color.
Yeah, okay, so.
Because
What's a foot candle?
Yeah, okay, so Debbie, do we have the light meter here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is a fantastic question. I told Brittany it would come up. This is the #1 question I get every time we do this talk.
yeah.
So there's a tool that's called the light meter, and we actually put it out to measure light. The Illuminating Engineering Society writes standards for how much light you should have. She wasn't kidding. In the operating room, in an art gallery, in a manufacturing facility, in the outdoor parking lot. So you basically take this light meter, you take the cap off, you've zeroed it out. There is a sensor inside there with a hemisphere cover, and it is reading, you can read in foot candles, which is the American version of lux. So I'll just take a guess. I didn't see the number, I have no idea, but based on what I'm seeing here, are you at
up there.
30-foot candles. Would be very typical for a assembly factory, okay, or an office. I mean, think about working in this environment all day. You don't want eye strain and, you know.
This is 30 and that's around 1.1?
Yeah.
Well, it's,
Yeah, because here's what happens to your eye when you start to, at nighttime. When you lose daylight,
Right.
there's a blue wavelength that measures 480 nanometers that tells your body it's nighttime, and your body starts to chemically and physically change. You start producing melatonin, you start to get sleepy. Your cones that measure red, green, blue start to shut down, and your major rod sensor kicks in, okay? So, your eye changes. You need less light at night to be able to see, just the way it works. Now in the daytime, because of what's going on outside, she talked about it's sunlight, it's overcast, there's 20,000, foot candles. We have to have 30 in here, because remember what I said earlier, you can't have something super bright and super dark, your eye can't do both. So we can't dim outdoors, so we have to raise this up. But the minute that goes down, this can go down. So, this is 1-foot candle, this room is 30-foot candles. But it's because you're adapting to what's out
To
there.
the outside, I get it. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
great question.
Think of how much fun you'll have when you go home tonight and you tell your family, you won't believe.
One for one.
You know, my wife hates me when I do these things.
I really enjoy this. It's so much fun to talk about what we do each day. And we really try to be very purposeful in everything that we design because we have this education behind us, right? But what I love is how DarkSky International boils it down to like 5 really important principles that we need to know when we're lighting at night. And this is available online as well, but we always try to be useful. Use light only when it's needed. Because that way, as Rick is saying, we don't want to overlight everything. We don't want to increase the light levels because more light means you need more light. We want to be targeted. We want to make sure the light is going where it needs to go. Do you need to, is it an ATM? Do you need to see the front of somebody's face? Is it a parking lot so you can safely navigate your walk from the parking lot to the store or wherever you're going? The low level. We always try to use the lowest light level necessary so that way, more light begets more light. Controlled. This one's really important, especially when it comes to regulations, ordinances. Do you need your porch light on all night? Maybe not. Lighting is for people, right? So where are the people? Control it when the people are there, turn it off when they're not there. Pretty easy. And lastly, the warm color is super important, and that's kind of getting back to the color temperature diagram we got to. It's you don't really need that blue light at night, and we'll get into it in a few minutes. Very important for biologically sensitive lighting for the species, just to be good stewards of the planet that we have. We don't really need that 5,000 K light to see better. We can achieve that in other ways. So let's be very mindful in how we use color temperature.
Rick, can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
Just to add to this is co-endorsed by DarkSky International and the Illuminating the Engineering Society. So again, the American Standards Organization. And they are actually ranked. So they're ranked in order of effectiveness. So what we've been finding is a lot of cities see this chart and they're like, oh, I can buy a warmer color light, I'm done. Yeah, it doesn't work that way, sorry. These all work together, and those items at the top are way more effective than the one down.
Yes.
When you use the word effective, what do you mean?
Okay, I wonder if that's the next couple slides.
We could get into it.
I can wait.
No, I love this.
So,
Yeah, what's your object here?
the title of the 5 principles is responsible outdoor lighting, and the word responsible basically says, we are humans, and to extend our day and be more productive, we need light at night. So, kudos to DarkSky International, they're not saying, oh, no, you can't use light. It's not what they're saying at all. They're saying, use it responsibly so that you put it only where it's needed, use it only when you need it, in only the light level you need. So effectiveness means that you're doing these things to prevent people from adapting to the wrong light level to keep them safe. Better visual performance. To keep light from trespassing into areas where it shouldn't have been. Don't go into habitat for other species. And just avoid the neighborly conflict. You know, the neighbor who says, man, that person keeps their light on all night and I can't sleep. Well, we're going to tell you about the hazards of the sleep cycle if it's disrupted. Did I answer that question fair enough? We're going to talk more about it.
Yeah. So getting to it, we wanted to review these 5 principles before we talk about light pollution. So light pollution, love this diagram up here. It shows you the range in which a typical, I would say maybe like the older low pressure sodium, kind of what we're familiar with the street lighting, how the light is concentrated down towards the road. But in the meantime, there's still an angle of light that goes outwards towards that 90-degree horizon. And in that, so we could have targeted light, right? So you see that dark yellow, the darker yellow cone, that's the targeted light, but really that light spill goes all the way from that luminaire into somebody's window, right? Super important to understand that light, LEDs are they're better at controlling this, but light wants to go everywhere. And so understanding we need the light trespass, like for example, last night when we went to take our readings, we went and we took the readings on the fence corners and to understand the light trespass of parking lots. There's a range in which you should exist to be a good neighbor, right? So we don't want to have people's houses lit up at night, that kind of thing. And in order to control that, we use directional lighting, we place lights only where they need to go, and it does take an extra step of rules or having a lighting designer to help you put those lights where they need to go, but it's not an impossible ask. There are things you can also do to the light themselves. So for example, this is a great street light image that shows some backspill. There are shields that you can place on these lights to cut off that direction, that high angle of light that we would call it. And this is great because LEDs allow us to control the light a little better, but like I said, like the light coming out doesn't want to go everywhere, so there are tools that we can use to minimize light trespass into other people's properties, and we can also control mounting height, the light location, all of these things to be very purposeful and where the light is being spread on a property.
So we're getting pretty sophisticated at looking at light pollution right now. So the Department of Energy has done the analysis. We waste about 30% of outdoor energy, which I think translated into, this is being recorded, I won't guess. I know the number, it's 30 billion or something like that, a year on energy that's wasted up into the night sky. Didn't hit its target. Okay? So we've got satellites now that take imagery, we've got high altitude balloons that take imagery, and you know, LEDs really hit the market about 2010. And everybody was like, yes, this is gonna solve the light pollution problem because LEDs are so directional, you can put the light exactly where you need it, and guess what? Light pollution has done nothing but go up by 10% a year ever since. They're cheap, they're easy to buy, everyone can buy them and put them out, and they just don't think about the 5 principles. Runaway train, a little bit, okay? So light pollution here, you can see it from the sky. I mean, this does all kinds of things for bird migration patterns. It hits the atmosphere, it turns into a reflected glow that transmits up to about 120 miles regularly. So people in, you know, rural Arizona are still affected by light pollution that comes from Scottsdale. You know, they can't get away from it. well, what did they do to deserve that? Right? So we can see it. I mean, we work with a ecological scientist at UCLA. He's tracked over 600 different species of animals and how they're affected by light. And these light domes travel so far that they get into animal habitat. It changes their eating habits, their mating habits. Populations are in decline. We'll talk more about that. But we can do better. We can do better. And so here in Vienna, instead of being able to see all of the stars at night and the Milky Way in an excellent dark sky site, on the Bortle scale, you're a 7. So you actually can't really see very many stars at all. Okay?
I mean, I got a question for the audience. Like looking at the Bortle scale, would you say a 7 feels right when you look at the night sky?
Yeah.
Yeah, confirmed.
Yep.
Are there areas you know nearby that would be an 8 or a 9?
Well, downtown DC,
You feel, okay, yeah.
So I'll let Brittany do a deeper dive on
Yeah.
Vienna.
So the fun part is bringing it to the community, like where are you? Just as an awareness, and as you know, like we said, it's an 8 or 9 in downtown DC. You can't see the night sky at all. So this is an image from the
FLIR satellite?
FLIR satellite tracking the light pollution. So this confirms what you know, right? It's really bright here. There's some areas that dip off a little lower. There's no, the best would be getting to dark, the black. But in here, yeah, Chesapeake Bay
The
is,
bay.
yeah, over the ocean, okay. Just, where are we at here, right? So then if we go specifically to Vienna, this is an interesting story too. So I'm sure, and this is cool because I'm not familiar with your travel corridors, but as you start to look at this, zoomed back, squinted eyes, you can figure out where the big highways are, right? I'm getting nodded heads. Yeah, and so then where does Vienna fall in that too? And what's interesting is, coming from an outside perspective, I look and I see a little yellow next to the orange, and I'm like, oh, there's an opportunity here for us to go from orange to yellow, probably, in a way. Vienna is situated, it's residential, it's not too commercial. There are ways to improve, and it's kind of exciting. Yes?
On that second spectrum there, far to the right is equivalent to the city from the last slide.
These are.
Is that a way to think about it, or is it not? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna say yes. This is measured in radiant watts, and obviously the darker reds is more radiant energy, which translates to the other slide where Washington DC was brighter.
So the darker color there
Yes.
is equivalent to the lighter,
Yeah, we switched.
bright lit skies
We
in the
switched.
last one.
Yeah, so we switched metrics on you there. So this is sky quality metric. And so, for places, I'll just say out west, that desire to be dark sky communities, that want to see the Milky Way, astrotourism, they're in the 17.5, 18 range. As I recall, Vienna is at 21.
Mm-hmm.
This is a sky quality metric, just like the light meter that Brittany showed. There is a sky quality meter, okay? This one is measured by a different satellite, and it's measuring the radiant energy. And as Brittany said, good news for you is that you're not in the middle of a commercial corridor. You have the opportunity to make your residential bedroom communities, more what you want them to be. And that's something, David, you said early on. Look, the whole thing about lighting is Vienna should be allowed to have an identity, a character. You want the architecture and the lighting to represent you. We can do that. Lighting designers can do that. but there's also ways to do it responsibly. Not hard.
So,
Two questions.
go back to the, you see that big looming yellowish orange spot just to the northeast of us, Tyson's.
We see it.
So, the bad news is that's projected to grow significantly over the next 20 years or so.
Okay?
And if I go back to your point about basically how that light then scatters and affects a broader area, it sounds like we should be talking Fairfax County as well, because it has a big impact on us, and that could ultimately have a bigger impact than what we do here.
Yeah, you're bringing up a great question, and I'll just say it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg, right? So, someone has to set the example for others to go see.
Right. True.
And, I was asked one time to participate in this exercise in Oak Park, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago. And I mean, I kind of was like, really? Like,
I know Oak Park, yeah.
can you do anything there,
Why would you want
But the reality is, it's a leadership play. We have seen recently, like Fenwick Island, Delaware, who wants to do the right thing so that after they did it, they can go to their 3 neighbors and say, this is what we did. Might you consider doing the same?
Yeah.
Eileen?
I just wanted to mention that in the Fairfax County Public Library, you can check out DarkSky's backpack, and it has a sky quality meter in it. So, and it talks about the Globe at Night program, but I'd like more people to know about that, because I don't think they're being checked out.
That's a perk right there.
Yeah, so it's kind of fun to go out and check it out.
That's great. Yeah, I see the situation happening. So basically, what organizations like DarkSky International are doing, right? It's a nonprofit organization that studies all the latest research, and they are coming out with, starting tomorrow, they're coming out with new recommended legislative languages for states to adopt as a state statute, and municipal ordinance requirements that they feel are most effective to curb this 10% light pollution escalation, okay? So, it's not gonna happen any other way than hard work. Okay, so I applaud Town of Vienna for getting to the point you're at. I mean, you could be the leaders that are the model. So we touched on it, and we're gonna just say we're not doctors, we aren't the research scientists, we're just regurgitating the research here, but we've talked about the Illuminating Engineering Society. This is one technical memorandum that's been put out on SkyGlow. These are some quotes from the document. But basically it's saying that if you have blue light that is not natural at night in an amount over 3 lux, which is 0.3 foot candles, you will suppress your melatonin circadian cycle, and you will start to suffer the effects of depression, cancer, all kinds of health-related issues. So this isn't just an outdoor lighting issue. Think about the phone in your hand as you go to bed, the television in your bedroom that you watch. If those light levels are high enough and the blue content is high enough, you are putting your own health at risk. You need darkness at night to stay healthy. And so do the animals, and unfortunately the animals can't get out of the light that we produce. But here's a list of some of those: diabetes, heart disease, cancer, eye strain, depression, okay? So, as we pointed out, outdoor lighting should be at a nice low level. 1.1 foot candles is what we showed in Denver, which is very different than 30 in the inside, okay? So light level matters, spectrum matters. Go back to the 5 principles. Don't pick just one, don't do just one thing, do them all, okay? Wildlife, migratory disruption is huge. Like I said, premature death, this is the tribute in light from 9/11, Charles Stone from Fisher Ranch Stone, good friend of ours. You know, they put these up initially, killed well over 100,000 birds. And so the tribute light no longer runs nonstop. They shut it down to let the birds escape the light, because they will fly to their death, okay? And it gets even worse when we talk about moths. If you haven't been to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, the current exhibit called Lights Out talks about insect Armageddon. The moth population, which pollinates our crops, our food, is down 90%. So here's some studies that talk about, you know, the decline of moth population. Now, moths are just one type of pollinators, but the point is, artificial light at night is not natural, and it can impact. We've only been doing this for 100 years. You know, this is all pretty new technology to humans. So we need to pay attention to the science and head where it's head to lighting regulations.
I like this one.
Is this
This might be you.
what is it? Oh yeah, okay. So I'll handle the contents. So as I mentioned, tomorrow's a very big day for DarkSky International. Is basically putting out some standards that have been endorsed, helped by organizations and experts, people like the National Park System, the American Astronomical Society, the American Bird Conservancy, and others. Your ordinance should really have a purpose with some recitals and goals. The reason is simple. When there's changeover in the staff, how does the new staff know how to make a decision? What is the background information telling them why? What is the why? What's the purpose, okay? It's really important that we have that. What does this ordinance apply to? Does it apply to some things, most things, all things? And what are the triggers that force compliance? How do we get better? We should really address that in the ordinance. Of course, there will be exemptions. There's federal agencies with a broader authority, you know, FAA lighting, nautical lighting. There's all kinds, you know, OSHA, health reasons. So there's exemptions. There's things that the lighting ordinance will not apply to. And then there's prohibitions, things that you, the city, Town of Vienna, just don't want. Could be things that you pick that another city wouldn't pick. For example, just fun. Debbie and I were in Albuquerque, New Mexico not long ago. It's part of Route 66. They love neon. It's part of their identity. It's part of their character. They built into their ordinance talk and discussion about promoting neon and using neon. I've also worked on a city that prohibited. So it's, you know, it's not a right or wrong. It's what do you want your town to be, okay? So general lighting requirements. It's the 5 principles, right? It's the light level. It's that uplight control, which is targeting, but it only where it's needed. If we put it up, we're wasting it. If we put it out at a high angle, we're producing glare, we're hurting your vision, and we're wasting it. That's the worst. Trespass thresholds for residential property. Do you want them for commercial property? Do you want nighttime hours? Do you want something to change at 11 p.m.? You know, do you want some lights to dim? And then what is your spectrum standard? You know, I'll just tell you, that, like New York City, when LEDs first came out, as Brittany said, it's a metal semiconductor chip made of indium and gallium, and it burns blue. And they put street lights out at 4,000 Kelvin. And guess what? They are replacing every one of them because the residents resisted and said, "There's no way, we don't want that." Okay, early adopters got bit, but here we are. And then finally, we'll dive in deep on residential, non-residential sports fields. I hope you consider sports fields. We have amazing criteria of how to do sports fields effectively, and that includes baseball and football, aerial sports, and tennis, pickleball. And of course, you know, the application process. What helps your staff when people apply for lighting? What information do you want them to give you to make your job easier? That's where Katie comes in. She's the star at how to do that for cities. And then finally, how do you enforce it? Someone might need a light meter. I apologize. They might need to go out at night and take the light measurement. Just happens.
How much do they cost?
Well, the really good ones are approaching $1,000.
Okay.
You can buy one for 100, but don't.
Thank you.
Lighting zones. Britt?
Okay. All right, so something we set the stage for the lighting education 101. So how do we actually apply the correct, accurate light levels for different areas in a neighborhood, right? So lighting is all context. Are we bright? Are we dim? And let's match that context. So lighting zones define the context of the exterior environment. We have a rating system from the natural dark zone, NLZ, which is, the middle of nowhere, appropriate for places like Yellowstone. And then we ramp up from there. We have LZ0 through LZ4. And so as you get higher in numbers, it means more light is allowed. So LZ4, I was always taught, is Times Square. Nothing else. I don't even know if the Vegas Strip. Do we say, okay, two places.
Luxor.
Okay, so 2 places in the US, they're allowed to use LZ4, but we don't do that anywhere else. And then in between, figuring out the LZ0 versus LZ3 has been difficult for some communities. And so, we just want to establish, here's the lighting zones that we have. Nothing to New York City. But how do you actually put that into action as a community? And so this is a fantastic diagram because it shows how Los Alamos applied the lighting zones to their zoning regulations. So when we converge these two ideas of here's our residential single use, we need to assign a lighting zone to that because it's naturally going to be darker. And especially after driving around last night, coming right off of Maple Street, it feels like it goes, dark really quickly. You guys don't have a lot of illuminated, continuously illuminated streets. There are some, but it's pretty dim. And so what can we do to marry the lighting zones with your zoning regulations? So here you can see there was a very specific plan in mind that Los Alamos wanted. They wanted to highlight certain areas of their community and allow those higher light levels, but they wanted to stop it at a lighting zone 2. If we go back, you can see LZ2 is small mid-city commercial. It's very easy for you to say everything is LZ3, but I would challenge Vienna to say that you probably could do an LZ2. And Los Alamos did it. And so you can tell from the diagram, the darker area is the commercial zones, and then as you go outwards, it becomes like a fan, like a gradient, right? And that's what we want to achieve here.
All right, I have a question for David. Who controls our streetlights? Is it us or is it Dominion Power? Or is it the county?
It is not us.
It's not us, right?
Yeah, I believe it's Dominion, but in concert with Fairfax County.
Okay,
I believe.
so welcome to the Commonwealth of Virginia, where responsibilities for different types of public services gets really freaky. Okay, so there's certain things we control, certain things the county controls, certain things the state controls, and Dominion Power, who's almost a state unto itself,
Right.
is also in control of some. So they, there's a couple streetlights in front of my house, and if they're on the blink, if I call you, you call Dominion. Is that how it normally works?
We'll check with Public Works. They're the ones who do the call.
But they do it, but basically, yeah, so can we even have the authority to establish standards?
And this is something that's actually common throughout the whole US, is that you have the utilities that own the streetlights, and so they are their own rule maker.
Right.
And then you also have, there's usually the right-of-way lighting standards and the private lighting standards. And so for the purposes of the Town of Vienna, we are hired for that private lighting rules and regulations. However, you can be the outstanding community, and that is how you can move outwards to influence decisions like Dominion, your county. It starts here, but then, the ripple effects of these decisions. And I'll tell you from Clanton's perspective, how we can influence our local lighting in the Boulder area is that we actually have written the standards for Excel Energy, okay? So we, as a lighting firm, decided that's important for us to invest in our community. And so we have influenced the lights that are being purchased by Xcel Energy, which is another huge utility. So like there's like a multifaceted plan here to influence everything together. And so by working on these pieces simultaneously, yes, eventually we hope for them to collide and have better lighting. So, you know, that is, yes, it's a hurdle, but it's not a discouraging game changer for us. We're marching forward and we keep doing the right thing for, yes.
So I want to confirm what Brittany said, is that the contract was a zoning contract, so it had to do with what people do on their private properties,
Right.
knowing that that is something that the town can control.
Right.
But what I hope is that if the town reaches some kind of version of a consensus of what we want to have in our town through this process, that gives us a basis and language, you know, vocabulary to approach other entities.
It's a great question. We see it everywhere we go. And you should know that it's, I'll just say 50-50. Some towns determined that the streetlights were too new and their utility is not willing to upgrade them and they're gonna stay as is, and therefore it does not get listed as part of the applicability of the ordinance. Okay. The other 50% have a pretty good relationship with their utility, and the equipment may have been right for replacing anyway. So they're actually open to participating in the requirements of the new ordinance, and the applicability includes street lighting. Clearly, from a light pollution, clearly that has the biggest impact on light pollution. Street lights are a major contributor, and now the good news is street lighting has to meet an ANSI IES lighting standard. So they aren't purposely grossly over lighting the streets, but the reality is they may have a lot of high angle light, they may have a lot of glare, and they may have a distribution type that actually, in order to meet the minimums, something is overlit. So anyway, I just want to encourage you that you don't have to be afraid of it. I mean, if you want to have a relationship with your utility and your street lights, you could lean into, like, how old are they? Like, if they just replaced them last year, it's really bad timing. But if, you know, the typical lifespan, industry standard is 20 years. So you could write in to your ordinance, your choice, but one of the triggers could be an amortization period that said, we'll leave everything as is unless you need to replace it. That triggers compliance, or 20 years from now, you need to upgrade it. And the utility is going to say, okay, great, then I'm going to raise your rate. And there's a discussion that happens. So, Eileen, question?
My understanding is with the streetlights, that most of the manufacturers have some off-the-shelf kits to modify the streetlights, so they can add things to decrease the
Shielding.
shielding and the levels,
It's-
so.
It's all in their back pocket. If you ask them to put, remember the 90-degree vocabulary we had? If you ask them to shield their lights to 80 degrees, they have that solution in their back pocket. That shield is already designed. It may not be in their catalog, but they can do it. They can have a house side shield, they can prevent light from going where it's not. You should absolutely feel empowered to be able to ask for that. That's a no charge. They'll do that. But where I thought you were going, and what's important for you to know, and I told you I was a luminaire manufacturer. When the city of San Diego wanted to replace 300,000 lights, $3 more per light adds up to almost $1 million. So the utility doesn't necessarily have an incentive to buy the more expensive product, even if it was better, unless your ordinance demands it. So, something to consider. David?
I'm thinking about your early discussion about contrast. And I'm hoping, this isn't something you have to answer right now, but, that we don't do something that's inadvertently blinding by lowering the lights on private properties before we have lowered the lights on the roads, thereby creating a bit of a blinding impact by creating more contrast. So just thinking through.
It's interesting you say that, because here in Los Alamos, they actually had a street where after you went by a golf course, which was rather brightly lit, you then traveled through a really dark area where people would hit, I think it was deer. They hit something, right? And the point was, exactly what you're saying, is that there was no coordination between what the golf course was doing and what the street light was doing. This is where lighting zones come in. It's just a design map saying that this is a designed, thoughtful, coordinated effort to step people down from bright to dark in a transitional method so that their eye can adapt lower, 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 okay? It gives you the power from people just creating a patchwork of, I can buy whatever I want, I can do whatever I want, and now you're gonna traverse through bright, dark, bright, 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 dark, 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 and you're gonna not feel right, you're not gonna see right, it's not gonna be the identity you want. So this map, and I have fun telling the story, but this is the home to our federal plutonium storage. They have extremely bright scientists that live in Los Alamos and security issues. And so the fact that they only needed a lighting zone 2 for that activity should tell you a lot. And it's, again, they wanted to keep the natural area and the residential areas a little bit lower light level, which allowed the commercial areas to be lighting zone 2. They still seem bright because everything else is dark. It's a design.
This may come up later, but in moving to lighting zone 2 in Los Alamos, what would, presumably changes had to be made by both residents and businesses. In particular, for the business adjustments that had to be made to comply, what were they, and was there any pushback from any costs, incremental costs that they had to incur, time spent doing it, and what was their reaction, and how did they get into compliance with what the town wanted to do?
Okay, great question. And I'm going completely off memory here, but the typical strategy, one we did in Los Alamos, is we have a very clever statement that basically says if there's a financial burden to the owner, they had, I think, up to 5 years to meet compliance, unless a municipal official deemed that it was a hazard or a nuisance. And whatever the statement was, I know there was a negotiation of, is it 3 years, is it 5 years, is it 10 years, but basically it was a negotiation of when do we trigger them to do the right thing? And then there's always this sort of like, they can get a 1-year extension if they show financial burden. So there's language in there that sort of allows it. But I would say no, I would say there was no pushback. We literally got that through, I think, on the first city council vote, as I recall.
We still have to check, Virginia, different ruling, Dillon law, because he's checking to see what we are able to require. So, as of right now, our understanding is when you change the money or upgrading, you need to meet new standards. But if you have an existing light, that's
Your
your,
grandfather.
yeah.
Yeah, that's gotta be our big issue.
And that doesn't mean changing a light bulb, it means changing the fixture, is how we understand it.
Yeah, I understand that too.
And as we talked to Kelly and pointed out, that you are fortunate that in Virginia, there is actually a state law which Virginia has for light trespass and a couple other things. And I think in the statute, it literally says, it's on state-owned property to be an example for the rest of the state. So there's a chance, we should, we can revisit that, but I'm not discouraged. But I do want to set this up for Brittany that, again, we've been talking about light levels and standards and how do you know what to do and where you do it and everything else. This is the document.
Yes, so as a lighting designer, what's the appropriate light level? There has to be standards, there has to be a benchmark that we're designing to, and this is the document that we reference. This document was, I don't know how many years in the making?
5.
5 years. The top lighting professionals in the world all gathered under Rick's direction to get this passed. And what's fabulous about it is it integrates the idea of a lighting zone and the appropriate task at hand. So here you can see, it's probably a little small, but the gray bands that are going across, that represents the lighting zone. So as a designer, I can say, okay, LZ2 over, I need this amount of vertical illumination. It's all there, and it's all of these guidelines that come together to tell us and keep us, responsible for that particular zone, for the need. It's all in here. This is a great document. I stand by this document as a designer, and I can tell you that it backs us up for security lighting, what's the appropriate visual needs for the people using the space. It's there. So when people come and say, okay, well, security lighting, it doesn't feel like it's bright enough. Like, we can go back to this standard, we can grab one of these, and we can verify. So these levels are all professionally used, and it's something that, has held up in court as well, I believe.
Yeah, and
So-
then there's a second document for roadway.
Yes.
So this is the non-roadway document, there is a second document for roadway.
Right, and this is, we used to call it the lighting Bible. I mean, everything you need to know in here. It's really great. In the ordinances that we write, we always reference these documents because it just brings you back to what's the appropriate amount. And so, what I wanted to get into, why we're here. So this is kind of like our last wrapping us up slide. What are we doing for the city of Vienna, for the town of Vienna, sorry. So here we came today, we're doing our community outreach and engagement. We're teaching, we're trying to get the Lighting 101 education to your public so that way, as together, we can come together and develop these ordinances and these languages that's gonna work for your community. We also, in the beginning, we began with a discovery memo, like what is going on with the town of Vienna, reviewed all of your regulations, frontwards, backwards. And so moving forward, what we wanna do is continue this community outreach and engagement process. This is very important for us as designers. As you know, this is being recorded, this is posted, this information on the boards is also available online. We want to continue to have an open door of concerns that are happening within the community, and so they can funnel through our survey, and through Kelly, Charmaine, just having that open, because we really want to make sure that in what format and what media people are comfortable in expressing their concerns is open. That's going to help us get to the draft regulations and guidelines. So we're going to be creating those documents, and then what I love and the flavor that we bring to it is the lighting compliance forms. How do you actually put together a permit application that's simple and easy and can run through the process rather seamlessly? And so we have these documents created that will check with the actual regulations we write, so that's happening as well. And then, in the end, we're gonna be doing our public hearings to get it adopted. So this is the step-by-step process we have as a firm outlined. We're working with the town to march us forward. Just wanted you all to know. And with that, more questions?
So I want to tell you about one example of contrast that I experienced in Tasmania, of all places, which is a very dark, especially when you get in the interior of Tasmania. It's totally dark. The other thing about Tasmania is that there are critters crossing the roads, all sorts of weird critters, Dr. Seuss-like critters that you don't see, marsupials and things like that, weird type of kangaroo things that we don't even know about. They had the most visible roads that I had ever been on, and they had no lighting at all. It was all done with reflectors, and I swear they were more visible than anything that I've ever seen lit before, and it was because of the contrast, If just a little bit of light from your car. And the reflectors were much more elaborate than we have in our country.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, why don't we do this everywhere? Because it's so much more effective than banging the light down.
Yeah.
Just for, you can see the road a lot better.
Yeah, I've seen those pictures. They're amazing. It's a full line of glow in the dark.
It's on both sides of the roads and in the middle.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, wow.
and, I mean, they spend a fortune on reflectors, but they spend zero on, energy.
Yes.
So I get the point.
Yeah.
I think for us, our big challenges are gonna be, how do we implement an ordinance that, allows for change over time? Because obviously, forcing compliance for existing structures and existing businesses, probably is not gonna fly. That's one. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that other council members have to see this. I mean, they need to know about this, because what I worry about is there's gonna be the jump action of, oh, that's too, we don't need to do that kind of thing. So the education board is very important, I believe. Obviously, you think it is too, because you're doing it. But,
Yeah, we can talk about that.
yeah, we'll see what maybe everybody else is waiting for
There's
the evening session tonight, right?
Yeah, but it's not gonna have the same presentation, so
Right.
it's,
Oh, I see. It's gonna be more touchy-feely.
It's gonna be more boards, more
Right.
one-on-one Q&A, availability, discussion. Eileen was gracious enough to bring in some of her boards. We could probably leverage those, because those are all things that we've projected here today. But I will say, your point about Tasmania, which is really important, comes back to the visual experience. What they've done is they've eliminated those high brightness sources
That's right, there's no other light anywhere else.
that throws your eye into an adaptation level it didn't want to be,
Right.
which allowed you to reconcile everything else in the field of view. And that's what's really important. I'll just make you aware of the future, right? In about 10 or 11, 12 years, there'll be this new vehicle-to-vehicle, it's called V2X technology, where cars talk to devices. They talk to each other, which is vehicle-to-vehicle, but they also talk to devices. They can talk to light poles, they can talk to crosswalks, and the idea is, because currently car headlights, I don't know if you've noticed, but they've been getting brighter and brighter and brighter and bluer and bluer and bluer. They're putting out about 30,000 lumens. Go back to our vocabulary, lumens, the amount of light coming out of them. In theory, the smarter the car gets about where it's at, the less light that would be needed. The light is all about car-person conflict. If you've got vehicle-to-vehicle communication, it's going to become about vehicle-to-person conflict, which is going to be pedestrian lighting, which is what you asked us to look at, which is what RP43 is. So, with that in mind, perhaps our roadway, perhaps our roads and our streetlights and our cars will all be part of a future model. There's people working on it.
I know that cost is a factor for businesses and for residents in terms of, their existing lighting. So I know there are some modifications and people can do things to reduce the amount of light. So for example, as I'm sure you all know from driving around, the pack lighting, wall packs on Mill Street are just terrible in terms of the light trespass for residences. Are there simple, inexpensive ways to modify those? The wall packs on the library corner, that's gonna be a new library, so I think that'll be a moot point. But in terms of residential lighting, I've put shields up on my lighting, I've used film. I know that you all, Clanton and Associates, worked with, Grand Canyon, and you have theatrical lighting designers on staff. So there are innovative and simple, easy solutions. So how can we incorporate that into things to keep the costs down for both the town, the businesses, and residences?
It's a great question, and that it is really important. So here's my take on it. We talked about 30% of light, several $1 billion of wasted light up into the night sky, right? Well, if we write requirements for the town of Vienna that describe the perfect thing to do, the most obvious thing to do is to say any new light that goes in from this day forward will meet that requirement. I mean, everyone can probably understand and agree to that. That doesn't cost anything to do that. What you can also implement at no cost is you can implement curfew. You can implement nighttime hours. It doesn't cost you anything saying after 11 p.m. you need to either dim your light or turn it off. You can change out light bulbs, meaning don't replace the entire $3,000 fixture, just replace the $10 bulb. You can add shields. You can, I mean, there's people who literally just add a $4 piece of metal to, wow. So the answer is yes. And what the town of Vienna has a choice to do is in terms of applicability, if it applies to all of these pedestrian lights, and the triggers that force compliance might be municipal officers deeming that it's a hazard or a nuisance, therefore you must comply, curfew must comply now, and within time we need light trespass to comply. You can absolutely pick the things that you want to comply with to try and avoid making people get into their own pocket. Right?
Too much.
Too much.
So first of all, thank you for joining us. Your organization has a great reputation for creative solutions and addressing these issues on workable ways to do things that want to get done. Also, thanks to Henry and the zoning commission and the town council and the town for approving what got into the first part of code creative.
I don't think we know what we bought.
But you're smart enough now to call in the experts to tell you what you want.
Yeah.
So just some comments and such from the conversation. We really hit on light pollution, light trespass. It's more than just wanting to see the stars again. You know, there's just been, you know, something that various organizations, it's all about us being able to see more. That's great, it's really fine. But I think the light trespass, light pollution impacts not only on our wildlife, but on ourselves is increasingly become a real issue. So thank you for paying attention to that. The health impacts. You know, I think that the concerns that I have is how we're going to go forward with this. Some have been addressed. You know, businesses. How do we address the needs of business for the perceived need for, not the perceived, the real need for security? What does that mean? Does it mean the lighting is intensely focused on the entire parking lot, 24/7? That's unshielded, or is there a way to mitigate that through peer pressure, good examples by other businesses next door doing the right thing, the right smart way to light? So it's smart lighting versus just bright security light. I know that there's this perception, brighter is better. I think law enforcement sometimes when you hear that from them, oh, best thing to do, put more lights on your, on your wall. Well, we've seen an example of the contrast with the bad guys behind the fence, and your bright light just helps that bad guy. So I think education is a real key to this whole process for both residents and our businesses. And particularly the issue of security, which I think is a key one. And I know I've heard that from businesses. And we got a lot of parking lot. We got to keep our customers secure. Absolutely true. You can't argue with that. But how do you do it smartly? How do you do it in the construct of what responsible lighting is and principles that you lay out? That'll be an education. And that'll be a quick education. How do we get around the billing rule? Not get around it. How do we comply with the billing rule and still put some impetus behind getting those that don't have to comply to move to compliance of sorts, whether it's through shielding, minor cost changes, just feeling of being good neighbors. I think that's one of the central things, because our existing grandfather, if you will, lighting is egregious in so many places, and that's not going to go for 20, 25 years. So I think the start that we've got with the current ordinance puts in place some things that we can do. That will get better with this process. And I think this grandfather existing lighting, somehow we've got to figure out how to educate, inform, persuade, individual, to do the right thing, both on residents and in business, recognizing that they have costs, and do things cost money, and gotta be good. So yeah, some of the community thing I think is really good, and very nice. So I see some things to do there, so thank you very much. I think it's been great. Riley, thanks for your participation in DarkSky. I think they've got, I'm really looking forward to having a new model come to this process.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Can I make two comments to your comments that, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I will just tell you that there's two requirements that I'm really excited about that other cities are starting to do, okay? The first one, remember the 5 principles, pretty simple. So for the people on Zoom, harder to see, but imagine here, this is a building entrance. Everyone can see that. Let's say it's a building within lighting zone 2, and the lighting standard allows us to arrange. It allows us a range because if it is a long-term care facility, the light level might need to be higher because all of the eyes are more aged. If fresh snow has fallen, we might need to use a lower light level because the reflectance of the snow is higher. So this is a range for a reason. One of the requirements that a lot of people are doing now is they're saying, thou shalt not illuminate more than 25% more than this number. It's a tolerance, 25% more. That's fair, right? You can go higher than this. We're gonna let you go higher than this, 25% higher than that, and you'll still be in compliance. The reason is because what we found is that the parking lot standard has changed over time. And there are people, lighting designers, who have 20 years of parking lot experience, and they are currently lighting parking lots to 5 times more than the IES standard. So if you adopt a requirement that says thou shalt not light more than 25% of the standard, that 20-year lighting designer had better check their numbers.
I want to make a comment about security. One thing that irks me always as a lighting designer is the thought that better security means more light. And in our experience, we've run these studies where we overlay the violent crimes and the light levels, and you'll actually find that the brighter areas are where the violent crimes will happen. So there's not, there's not causation. Is there correlation sometimes in some communities? Yes and no, but it's all over the map. And I think one of the examples I have is a job trailer was stolen in the middle of the day in Denver. Things happen when we have daylight. So kind of getting to that feels like a crutch, and then I always like to question that. Why are you feeling uncomfortable? What would make you feel more comfortable? Because the question isn't, maybe it's vertical light levels that they want and not horizontal. So just kind of poking into that is what I want us to do as we move forward together to make these regulations. Is we get those security questions come up, let's dig into what the experience was that makes them think more light is going to be better, and let's go from there. So that's what I like to do.
You have one more, and then I'll finish my second requirement.
And to the addressing the security issue, one of the other phenomenon is the uplighting on our residences and the real estate community and the design. And with LEDs, it's even exacerbated, and now we're getting lighting on the lintels and everything like that. 24, let's change the color for Halloween to all orange. This is a real challenge, and maybe that's going to be part of how we address what we're doing. The other thing is, on November 17th, this is a plug, DarkSky NOVA is having a Starbright Save the Night awareness program in the Vienna Community Center, with a number of different organizations addressing these kinds of things. Paul and Vince, for example, from Body Place is giving a kind of time light being affected by light to how can you deal with that from a mindless and health perspective. So I encourage
this may be out of the scope, but how do you all consult on the enforcement of the ordinances? Because as Vienna brought in their new ordinances at the end of last year, the way it's being enforced, like for spotlights, simply meant aiming them down would eliminate the light trespass, but apparently that's not how the codes are being interpreted, and so I'd like to understand how that's normally done with other communities, and how can we, to me, just changing the aim of a fixture is not replacing it, it's not, all you're doing is slightly modifying it,
So the state of New Mexico right now is drafted state legislation that says anything over 300 lumens would have to be downward directed. What that allows is landscaping light and facade lighting as long as it's less than 300 lumens. And it's a pretty effective way, because if you go look at, the hardware stores and the products you can buy, these satellite images are not from those products. And so that's one idea, because we talked about the value of vertical illuminance. Understanding your surroundings, your points of egress, how do I navigate, where do I want to go, what landmarks do I see? That's all because we're looking to the horizon, we're looking for vertical light. So to light a tree over there or a sculpture over there helps give me confidence, helps me understand my surroundings and what I'm gonna do. So we don't frown on that, but we gotta keep it at a low level, it's gotta hit its target, and it's gotta go off when it's not needed. Boom, 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 principles, it's that easy. Those are the offenders. Now, we're learning about light levels, right? These street lights we're talking about start at 3,000 lumens and go up. So 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 lumens. So a 200 lumen product is low. Okay? So I hope I kind of answered your question about what some people are doing in terms of being strict downlight. The thing I did want to say to Bill's comments, there's a new research paper coming out soon, and it talks about the utility and efficiency of light that's emitted between 80 and 90 degrees. Everyone knows what 90 degrees is, right? So you can imagine where 80 degrees is, right? So it's horizontal and near horizontal light. And what the research paper shows is that you could not put out enough intensity at that trajectory, at that pole height, to hit the ground and meet any of these light levels without causing glare that allows you to not see the very light you put on the ground. Did I describe that okay? Okay, it's counterproductive light. For that reason, we are
trying to light that little sliver of the pie, actually, it actually reduces the amount you can see because of the glare associated with that. So
I'm gonna put your name on the article. That's exactly right.
Co-contributor.
Because of that, we are seeing cities that are restricting the amount of light above 80 degrees. Now, Eileen will know this, and anyone in DarkSky knows this. For the last 14 years, everyone's been all bent on, let's have full cutoff, fully shielded, nothing above 90 degrees. That is not good enough. It needs to be above 80 degrees. So here's how, Bill, this is my answer to you. If you put it in the ordinance now, that all things new would limit the light above 80 degrees, all new products, they would look better, less glare for the pedestrians, less light trespass, less glare, less light pollution, right? It's all good, 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 good. In the meantime, if you can't install a new fixture, add a shield.
That's what I'm hoping.
For $4. So if the city thought that was a good idea and added that to the language, you'd say, we're not gonna overlight more than 25% standards, and we're not gonna emit above 80 degrees. You just covered two of the top three responsible outdoor lighting issues, targeted and light level. Those are pretty effective for very little effort. Did we miss anything? Debbie, Katie, anything you think that we should cover that we haven't covered?
I think so.
Okay. Questions?
Are there any online questions? No?
Okay, well, thank you again, and as Brittany said, we are here to answer your questions. Thank you so much for letting us participate in this. I love the idea of having other city council members see this video, because unless everyone becomes educated on the subject, it's really hard to craft.
We're gonna talk options with you about how to do it,
Okay.
either video or alternate presentation or something like that.
Love it.
Also commissions and committees. taking notice.
Love this video.